This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the utility meeting for City of Lake Stevens and Lake Stevens Sewer District. We're a couple minutes behind, but we're going to call 6:06 p.m. on June 22nd, 2022. I'm thinking I'm saying the right day. Yes, I am. If you're joining us virtually or by phone or in person, Board of Commissioners, all three commissioners are present. We have members of the utility committee, Councilmember Peter Shagan, Councilmember Tangent's joining us by phone, and I think Mayor Gailey is not joining us this afternoon, but we also have staff. So with that, open it up and then turn it over to the city partners who are the chairs this year to run the meeting.
So I'm not there in person, maybe Gary can go ahead and run the meeting.
He would love to do that.
Thanks, Marcus. So public forum, any comments from the public? No?
What's that?
Any comments from the public?
As far as what?
Anything,
Okay.
anything you want to talk about?
I'll stay while I'm here, then I can get out of your hair.
Okay, you can say the whole thing.
I turned in the papers for a reduced rate for low income, and I'm also disabled and retired. And anyway, and two people in there told me, they says it's your income, just your income. They count. Two different times when I happened to come in there. So I got the form, filled it out, came back in again because I didn't get any answer, and they said, you make too much. I said, you told me it's my income. I says, and so it's $40,000 is your limit, supposedly. So anyway, my income tax adjusted shows 43. 8,000 of that is my savings, my IRA. But because it shows up as, income on my income tax, I don't qualify. That's not right. You shouldn't be counting my savings that I'm living on.
Well, that would be something I think we can have staff check with you in that. Obviously, they've got your information that you've given us on the sign-up sheet, but yeah, obviously we can have them reach out to you. I know the ladies up front will just take the information in, but we can have the general manager.
The general manager said?
Follow up with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I said, you put me into a position where I'm getting really close to going to the food bank. Because you raised the rate 13%. I mean, during all this, everything else has gone up. This is killing people. So anyway, that's what I have to say. If somebody would get up in touch with me.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. If all your contact information you put on the clipboard, your name and a phone number at least, so they can reach out. Obviously, yes, let the general manager follow up with you.
Okay.
Appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Okay. On to item number 4, project review draft comprehensive sewer plan. I'm assuming that's probably Jonathan.
Actually, we're going to turn it over to Lee Nelson from Gino.
Great.
Gino was the one contracted this year to do the comp plan for us. So the executive summary is in your packet, and then we also have the presentation to walk through it.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, everyone. If you've been on the utility committee for a little bit, much of this presentation should be familiar. I gave most of it maybe a year ago when we were working through parts of the plan before we had the capital improvement plan and the financial analysis. So I'll go ahead and get started. This is the outline of our sewer system wastewater facility plan. We start off with introduction, regulatory requirements, which are why we do the plan. I'll go through the service area, and we develop the population projections that get to our sewer flows. that go through the collection system and then to the treatment plant. And we look at both biosolids and then last, the financial analysis. So our study area is shown on the map here. Our study area is the entirety of the Lake Stevens urban growth area. You'll notice that not the entire urban growth area is part of the sewer district's incorporated boundary. We do regularly have annexations to bring areas into that boundary, and the sewer, any area within the urban growth boundary can be annexed into the sewer district. But they do need to be annexed into the sewer district before getting sewer service. Next, we have population projections. So we used the city's comp plan and growth rates to do our population projections. And we met with Russ Wright as we were doing this. He's confirmed our assumptions and how we used those. And so these used end of 2020 years, because it was about a year ago when we put all these numbers together so that we could do the analysis. Here's a summary. And so I'll back it up just a minute. I tend to use ERU, and that's an equivalent residential unit. That's a term we use in the sewer industry to have one customer. So whether it be commercial or a school or single family houses, we can make an equivalency so we can calculate our flows and loadings. Okay. Let me back up real quick. So on the previous slide, we showed how we developed the flows for, well, the population projections for the next 20 years. And we do that with the comp plan. And then for build out, we do it a little bit differently in that we use the land use that's adopted in each area, and we use the buildable lands study that's been prepared. And so I'll move to the next map. So areas that are already developed are in gray here. And these are areas that are not assumed to be either buildable or redevelopable per the buildable lands analysis. The areas that are hatched, mostly orange, but some black and some yellow being commercial and industrial. The orange is residential. These are areas that are assumed to be buildable, and so we use the adopted land use as the density for those areas. And I'll back it up one more. And so those buildable areas, we add on to the already developed areas that were on the map in gray to get our build out flows, which is the ultimate development of the entire service area. And this is just a summary of those, again, equivalent residential units. So we plan for a total of 21,923. And again, build out is sort of a theoretical in the future number that we plan to have. We don't assign a year to it because it's once everything is completely built. Next. So the next part of our plan is we look at the existing collection system. And in this plan, we have added to what had been done in previous plans. But the new thing in this plan is that we have a specific project every year in the next 10 years to replace about 20% of the oldest portions of the sewer system. So I have a summary of how much pipe and number of manholes are so old, and there is about 5% of the system that's over 50 years old and another 16% that's over 40 years old. And so those are nearing the end of the useful life for many of those pipes and manholes, especially for the materials that were used when they were constructed. Many of them are leaky and sources of infiltration. So the other component of this assessment was a lift station condition assessment. We used information that was collected during the previous comp plan as far as the extensive corrosion and the age of the electrical system. And then we conducted site assessments for each of the lift stations to prioritize which which will be rehabilitated the soonest. So we have a number of projects spanning over the 20-year period of the plan that will rehab the lift stations to provide new water service if needed. Most of the lift stations that are prioritized need backup power improvement or their generators need to be replaced. They'll need a bypass pump connection that allows the district to take an extra pump at any time and take the whole lift station out of service. Many of the lift stations don't currently have that ability. We're prioritizing security improvements, especially since there have been a number of break-ins lately. And anywhere that doesn't currently have odor control, we're looking at the needs of that and putting that in where necessary. Next, part of our flows and loading calculations, we did a flow metering project to get an idea of where we have the most I&I in the system. I'm not sure if you can see my pointer, but so we had meters around the district in either older sections of the system. If you can see the screen clearly, meter 3 and 4 were in older sections of the system, as well as 6. Meter 2 was in a significantly newer section of the collection system that was about 10 to 15 years old. And then meters 1 and 5 on this map were areas that are downstream, and so they took just a large portion of the collection system, and we wanted to compare the sum of those 2 meters with what we're seeing at the treatment plant to make sure all our assumptions were lining up as far as flows. So we had those meters in place last winter from January until March. We have a number of rain events, several that had up to an inch of rain. You can see the rainfall on the top of the graph, and then the flow meter totals for each of those meters. Then I'll get on. So we found a peak hour inflow and infiltration, so I&I, and that's kind of what we're looking for to confirm our assumptions. One surprising item that we found was for meter 2 that was in a relatively new section of the system had the second highest I&I, and it turned out there was an illicit connection in that area. So that has since been corrected. So we're not actually using the data that we found there, but we did use it to make that correction. Let's see, next. And stop me if anybody wants to jump in with anything. Let's see. Next, we have the flows and loadings that we've calculated. And here I show our NPDES permit limits and then where we are currently with each of those. And so the max month flow is one of the biggies, and we're at 75% of our limit there. So ecology has a threshold that once you get to, I believe it's 85% of your permitted either flow or load, that you need to start planning improvements for once you reach that threshold. And so this plan actually meets the requirements of that planning for those thresholds. Let's see, here's our inflow and infiltration assumptions. And I believe these were for existing portions of the system. And so we do have relatively, I'd like to say high, but it's normal for the Western Washington region of a peak hour I&I that we assumed of 1,616 gallons per acre per day. So here are our dry weather flows. I can talk about any of these in more detail, but let me know if you'd like that. So our I&I, we did use separate I&I for new service areas in our hydraulic model. All of this is to get to the flows and loadings that we use in the hydraulic model, where we look at the collection system capacity and then the treatment plant capacity. So we do use lower rates for new sections of the system that have newer gaskets, more watertight pipes, manholes that don't leak, that kind of thing. So here we have our projected flows at the treatment plant, both for our critical times that are the 6-year, 10-year, 20-year, and then build out. We project that we'll be reaching that 85% threshold in 2029. And that is, again, when you need to start planning for improvements to the hydraulic capacity of the plant. And this plan meets that planning requirement where we've indicated what facilities get built out at the plant at that time. Next. This is just a graphic representation of the flows that were shown on the last graph of both peak hour flow that we use to look at the collection system, and then peak day flows that are used more for the sizing of the wastewater treatment plant, and then max month flows, which is the permitted value for the hydraulic capacity of the treatment plant. And I don't expect you to see all these numbers. This is just to say that we've calculated both the BOD, which is the biochemical oxygen demand, and TSS. Those are measures of the total suspended solids. Sorry, those are measures of like strength of the wastewater. And we also include here the ammonia nitrogen, the nitrogen being important for the new nutrient permit that I'll talk about in a little bit. So as far as the parameters that are in your NPDES permit, we see the year that those reach capacity is beyond the 20-year planning period that's covered in this plan for all of those. We reach the 85% capacity, again, where you have to start planning for improvements, in 2029 for the flow, and then 2038 for BOD, and beyond 20 years for TSS. Moving on to the hydraulic model of the collection system. So this is where we look at what flow goes through each major section of pipe and the flows to each lift station. We have identified several areas that don't have capacity. So these maps have a detailed map on each quadrant of the district. The pipes shown in red are overcapacity at build out, and the ones that have yellow on top that stand out more are overcapacity currently. And so all the areas that are overcapacity, either existing or out through build out, have some sort of project either to divert flow away from that section of pipe or to replace it with a larger pipe. And again, this is in the southwest section. This is in the northwest section. We point out where there's a pressurized line here that's not actually a capacity deficiency that comes from the campus park area. We've got lift station 5, which is slated to be rehabbed, and we'll use the results of the hydraulic model to then increase the capacity when we do those lift station rehabilitations. Next, and these are, again, more lift stations that don't have capacity. There weren't really any new projects pointed out from our hydraulic model here that we hadn't seen in previous versions of the comp plan. So this lift station is pointed out as not having capacity, and this is in the Pasadena Heights neighborhood, but it is identified as a temporary lift station because it has a future gravity connection that's planned. And here we have each lift station and what we see as both its existing peak flow and 20-year flows. And again, we've used this data either to prioritize the lift station rehabilitation or to look at what each lift station should be upgraded to when we do get to that rehabilitation, if it's sooner than it needs for hydraulic capacity. Next. This shows the location of all of the projects in the capital improvement plan that relate to the collection system. And so all of the green lines were lines that were shown in the previous maps as either red or yellow, in that they were over capacity. And then blue lines are new sections of sewer pipe. And I should note, not all of the projects in the capital improvement plan are fully funded by the district. Some would be developer extensions, so that as areas develop, they would extend sewer lines into the areas and would be funded that way. Moving on to the wastewater treatment facility. This table here is the same as I showed on the previous table, but looks at the permit limits for the plant. So when we talked about the max month flow nearing its capacity in 2029, the project that we'll need to do then, and it corresponds also with the end of the useful life of the ultraviolet disinfection system. And so when the plant was built, there was an extra channel put in without UV lamps. In 2030, we have a project that will both, I believe, replace the lamps and install new lamps in the extra channel where they were intended when the plant was built. And then for the hydraulic capacity beyond 2041, there's a similar additional influent screen channel. Like right now there are 2, and this would add a 3rd to provide extra capacity when that's needed. See, the next slide will show graphically the wall elevations through the wastewater treatment plant, and will show that we're not projected to go over any of them through build out. And so we did an analysis of those flows through the plant for each of our critical times, 2021 existing, and then 6-year, 10-year, 20-year. I'm only showing the build out because they were all almost the same. So we have one line that is the peak hour flow at build out, and that's the dark blue line. And then we have a second light blue line that assumes that our equalization that's at the head of the plant has reached its capacity. And so that's actually sending the entirety of the peak hour flow through the plant. And each of those bars, the gray bars, are the height of the walls. And so you can see the water elevation through the plant doesn't reach the height of any of the walls. So we don't anticipate any overtopping at the plant through build out. See, so our analysis shows that the plant will meet the existing permit limits through 2041. And again, that's the 20-year horizon of this plan. Our main recommendation is to trial changing the existing gravity thickener to be a fermenter. And this will help with, again, the next thing, the nutrient permit. It will help reduce the amount of carbon, so the amount of new chemical that we'll need to purchase and add into the treatment system as part of reducing the nitrogen and your effluent. So I know you've heard about the nutrient permit that's coming, and there are a lot of unknowns about it right now. The permit as it currently stands shows that there's an optimization report that's due next March, and that will show how you can make changes to the existing plant to reduce nitrogen without major system improvements. And that's where we have a project to implement a carbon addition system. And so back to that, this might be a little too in the weeds, but the fermentation would provide extra carbon that will help reduce the nitrogen in the effluent so that we don't have to buy more carbon than we would. And then also in the permit is that we have a pretty large analysis to be done to show what would be required to reduce the nitrogen in the effluent to, and I'm missing the number, but a very low level, and that analysis is due at the end of 2025. This is a map of the plant, and it shows where each of the improvement projects that we're planning for are located. There are a number that are coming up that are maintenance related. Sorry for going back. And then this is just a process flow diagram of the plant, just to illustrate how complicated and how many different systems there are at the plant. The main things to know is on the left side of the diagram, you've got your influent, and on the right side, you've got your effluent going out to EB Slough. The water is at the top, and the other out is the truck taking biosolids out to whatever farm it's going to be land applied. We have a number of improvements at the wastewater treatment plant that are lower cost, kind of smaller projects that we have planned in the near term. One is hopefully nearly complete, is the back pulse pipe replacement. There's a section of corroded pipe that's being replaced. We are planning to fix some of the anoxic zone walls. There's a portion of the flow that currently short circuits, so we're going to add some stainless steel angles to correct that. There's a cooling improvement for HVAC, just to improve some blowers. And then the carbon addition system is, again, in service of reducing the nitrogen in the effluent. Those are all planned for this year. The other, so the other project that's this year, and the big one that's next year, the one this year is the alkalinity system. And I believe there's a pilot project that's going on now that will help us to hone in on the design parameters of that project. And then next year, the big project is to replace the membranes. And the membranes are the main form of treatment at the treatment plant. They've reached the end of their useful service life, which is 10 years, and that's a pretty big project to replace them. The new membranes, I believe, are somewhat improved from those that were available 10 years ago, and that's what we're planning to install. The next project is the nutrient reduction evaluation. I mentioned, we may have that listed twice, but that's the same nutrient reduction evaluation that's due in December of 2025. Again, as I mentioned before, the disinfection system improvements, that'll be in 2027, and the nutrient reduction implementation, and that will, at least 2029 is when it's currently in that nutrient permit. That could certainly change between now and then, but that would be where we would need to implement whatever strategies are recommended in that nutrient reduction evaluation that's due 3 years from now. The last project is a waste activated sludge thickener for the biosolids. And we'll go over that a little bit more in the biosolids section, which is coming up. Okay. So your solids management, again, the only project recommended as far as solids is that thickener. Our plan did an analysis of what it would take to produce Class A biosolids. So currently the plant produces Class B biosolids, and Class B biosolids need to be hauled to a site that's been permitted by ecology that allows biosolids to be put onto it at a certain rate and in certain conditions. Most of the sites in Washington are in Eastern Washington. Class A would be producing biosolids that anyone in the public could come get. A few jurisdictions in the state sell a product, but most give a Class A product away, but there aren't many that produce a Class A product. We're not recommending going to Class A production just because of the total life cycle cost. As you can see listed here, Class A production costs $10 million more than Class B production, and the contracted hauling is working out just fine right now. So I talked a little bit about, again, the recommended improvements, the two here. I already talked about the fermenter thickener. And again, that would modify some machines that are already at the plant to produce some more carbon that would allow us to reduce the nitrogen in the effluent. And then a new rotary screen thickening system in 2030. So that's 8 years away. And last is a summary of the financial analysis. FCS group helped us prepare the financial analysis. So I'm just going to be reading through their recommendations. The district has already adopted both major recommendations of that financial analysis. As of May 1st, the general facility charge, which is the connection fee to new customers of the district, was increased from $10,400 per equivalent residential unit to $13,500. And the monthly rate was increased from $86 to $99. And that was effective of the beginning of this month. The next rate increase, and so when the plan was prepared, there was a concept that there would be few increases that would happen more spread out. You could certainly, as a policy change, make those more frequent and less smaller rate increases as you go. We would look to FCS to provide the details of that in the future. That is not at all my area of expertise. The assumptions that went into the financial analysis are that we keep 90 days of operating revenue. The capital reserve does not go below $1.5 million. The rates, so that $99 a month per ERU goes to fund operations and maintenance of the district. And then the general facility charge funds capital projects. There was an inflation assumed at a higher rate than we typically would for the next 3 years, just given the state of inflation these days. So it's assumed to be 5% through 2024, and after that, more typical long-range value of 2%. And so we currently have a full draft of the facility plan, and it's available at the district's website. I joke, it's not quite 1,000 pages, but it's 900 and something. You're welcome to go read it, but we're ready to submit that to Ecology. It takes them a while to approve it. We would expect to be able to get comments back from them and address anything that they have in order to be able to adopt the plan in the fall. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Lee.
Are there any questions?
It looks like a detailed analysis. I'll make that.
If I put you to sleep, there can't be any questions.
For how much material covered, 25 minutes, you did fine. Wow, thank you.
All right, thank you, Lee. On to item B, future space needs of the district. I know Jean and Mariah have met last 2 weeks ago or something, last week or something like that.
No, actually, Mariah and Aaron met.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so last Thursday, Jonathan and I went and visited Aaron Halverson over at the Public Works shop. He gave us a tour around the shop and, just discussed maybe what our needs were and what, if that would maybe work or not. It looks promising. Certainly if we had to move today, there's not enough room there, but in the future, I think maybe there could be. I guess there's an idea that maybe Parks is moving out of that building, which would create some space that we could occupy at some point. The other thing that Aaron and I discussed was there's a capital project happening in July, it's supposed to start, to bring sewer fairly close to the Public Works building. We're about 580 feet away, so maybe there's a possibility we could share in a project to move up that project, because currently the district doesn't have that project in the CIP until at least 2025. But if we shared in the past, we could certainly move it up closer, which could get the Public Works shop onto sewer sooner if there was any interest in that. But that's at least the update of where we're at on that.
So promising likelihood better than 50%.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's certainly an open possibility.
Yeah.
Right. There's some moving parts that have to fall in place, and luckily we don't have to move tomorrow, but it's certainly worth continuing conversation on.
Good.
If there's a there, I think we should do it sooner than later. I mean, if not that, assuming it works for the city, if there's a joint project or whatever, I just think that'd be there's a need and there's an option. Seems like a great thing to push forward.
What effect does moving that sewer closer to, getting it closer to the building, what effect does that have on the capability of the building? Any?
Yeah, you'd be able to use that lot more fully, so you could build additional structures.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah.
We're in the process of getting it surveyed right now, so if you can envision pulling in the driveway to the south side, there's tree lines and there's blackberries, that's where all the drain field is for the existing shop. And then neighboring properties are, is my understanding, are also utilizing part of the city lot years ago, prior to even being a city lot, for their drain field. We'll know that shortly when the survey is done. But that being said, if we could pick up those properties on sewer, the city lot on sewer, now all of a sudden you've got quite a bit of area there to put up another structure. Possibly a horseshoe driveway. We'll know more when that survey is done. The other domino that's in place is Eagle Ridge Park has that shop there that is currently being used by the food bank. As soon as that building's done, we can get them moved. We want to be able to utilize that for park operations as well, or maybe it's a joint spot for sewer, but that facility's there. It'll be, open hopefully within years. We get the food bank out of the ground. So dominoes, just like we're always dealing with.
Yeah.
Is it 2 or 3 houses that are to the south of the shop?
I think there's 3 that are.
They go right down to that one, because I was thinking, future expansion, I mean, you always look at, it might be something to look at eventually down there, but, kind of clean up the zoning now, because it's industrial, places make a little bit of noise, those people may not want to hear 24/7. I mean, I remember when that was they made wood pellets, or not pellets, but Presto logs there once before. And
I love that. Not all the broken ones really cheap. Great deal.
86 decibel reverse alarms on all the trucks might drive people away.
But you just look at, hey, if there's, because those are good sized lots, eventually if you could expand, you get sewer down there, that could enlarge the lot for the entire public works facility and give some a lot of
Options.
Yeah.
And we are active as far as our Parks Department formation. Correct. We've advertised for directors, so it is going.
Interviews on Monday.
Yeah. We just need to get the food bank.
What is the railroad there? I mean, I know they've broken ground in theory, but
They're waiting for your check.
Yeah.
that's all it is. We can do that. No.
I don't know, they're having a meeting tomorrow night at Francisco's for an update. So.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some work go on where they've been doing some work out there, because I don't know if it's just utility work that they do on a lot. I was getting kind of like, hey, maybe we'll see a pad or a wall get tilted up, but nothing so far.
All right, good progress on that. So item C, path forward for the city and the district. I guess that's probably the Dan and Gary show, but Dan and I have met a couple of times since our last meeting. I guess to start it off, I see no reason why we can't continue to meet. We kind of put, the end of June as far as a time frame, but I think we make great progress in the time that we've had. And I guess I'm optimistic that we're moving forward in a positive manner. So I would request that we, I don't know, informally do another 30 days or 45 days or something of that sort. We do have some work ahead of us, but I mean, we have done a lot and just kind of rehash some of this stuff, but it took us quite an effort to kind of get our bookends as far as our draft memo as to kind of what we're kind of operating under. It hasn't really been adopted by anybody, but I think Dan and I are kind of using that as some guideposts to kind of work within. I met with both Kevin, Commissioner Kochi, and Andrea, Commissioner Wright, to kind of, highlight their concerns and answer questions and so forth. And I think those were both positive meetings. I think, the areas of concerns we can overcome, and we are working on those. As far as the homework aspect of it, we have met with Kevin O'Brien and kind of went through the do's and the don'ts of his merger operation. Met with him last week. We're going to be meeting hopefully with a representative of the Ronald
and Shorewater or Shoreline that went through that,
and trying to get some background on, the process, procedures, things like that. Again, the do's and the don'ts. The meeting with Kevin was very informative, I thought, in the sense that this is a recent deal, a much bigger organization than what we're talking about, but kind of the reverse. We had the Lake Stevens Fire District go into a large, or I should say actually the opposite kind of took place. A larger group kind of went into the Lake Stevens hierarchy, and here we've kind of got the opposite here. So some of the things that he brought up is, you need to focus on why we're doing this. And I think as far as that exercise today, maybe that would be something that we could talk about. But the other thing that he really stressed is they rush things, and they did that in about a year, and that was just too much. And one mistake he said they did was not involve the unions. They involved the unions after the merger. And so we've got two different unions going on here as far as the employees, as far as the collection side of it. And I don't think your wastewater people are part of the union. They are.
Yeah, it's operation and admin.
Okay.
It's a separation.
But getting that information and trying to involve those folks previous, I think is probably a good path to go so that we can get, and that leads into this issue of the fear from the employees and so forth, try to get them into the process as to where we're going, why we're doing it, and let them resolve some of these issues. And with that, hopefully we can get some buy-in from them, kind of that sense of ownership. So anything you want to add in regards to that? I mean, there's some other things he talked about, but I think the three things were explain the why, address the fear, and get the employees involved. So
it was something that he really, he looked at just because of their experience going through it. Some of the things they did were you had different union contracts coming into play, because even though on the firefighter, the front side, the locals, so under the, if firefighters, the IAFF, the International Association of Firefighters, they each have locals, and they tended to come together to at least address that, hey, if one day we do decide to come together, let's have like a playbook we all understand, because there's going to be the little idiosyncrasies that this local might do versus that local. So they got those. But one thing he did recognize was going into this, we hadn't finished negotiating with one union on one side and the local, and well, it opened up Pandora's box on the other side. So I was trying to kind of get that together. But he said, I would definitely bring people in that have a stake in this entire process in point place. So they know what fears, because everybody has internal fears and going in there. So, and then really defining the why are we doing this? Part of it really comes down to is, I think what we're looking at prospectively from just electeds and also from the folks that are running both organizations is, we know this isn't going to work come 2033 and the light switch comes on, because this could just massive chaos is what is going to ensue if we don't have a plan going into how we're going to address this. You know, one thing that like I've always kind of stated, I mean, one of the biggest fears that I guess, you know, if we looked at it as an elected on this side of the house, we're going to walk with all our employees to the end, you know, when this comes together. The only people that should be leaving would be the 3 electeds on our side, because we go from a district that has its own representation to now it becomes a department of the city. So you won't see us, at least in the current form of being a commissioner, but we want to be able to walk that through. And I think that's part of trying to keep everybody that's what we're going to do. And, you know, Kevin kind of touched on that, you know, keeping all of those. It's tough at times when you have a lot of elected involved, because, you know, I mean, he went from a 3-person board to a 9-person board. And I remember when he did that, because I said, good luck with that, because I knew what it was like to operate under a 7-person council, and, you know, you had a mayor, but I mean, it makes it difficult, the more bureaucracy you can add to that. But we're trying to kind of minimize it and just get people comfortable. But the elected wise, from our perspective, is what to go. But, you know, he really said they even started a culture. They wanted to make sure the culture of the organization is there, that, you know, they worked hard on the front end to try to make sure that they could ensure that the cultures of the organization, because it's going to take a completely new identity on, no matter what you do. You can't introduce, you know, they went from, what do you say, how many employees? They might have 40 or 60 employees.
Yeah, 150 or
to, yeah, the district, I mean, 7, when it was Snohomish County Fire Protection District 7, had 100, but now there are 200 plus. So you got to try to get that in there. And that's the thing, is trying to find that common ground. And they still work that, as they have internal stakeholder employees that come together that represent everybody to try to make sure that they're continuing that to what we're building our new culture to be, because it isn't just going to stay one side or the other, it's going to be a both. So
I think the 2 of you are the right folks to limit the electeds, at least in terms of the discussion. And I think as long as we have it's being productive, we should continue that. I think that's great. And both of you have made great progress, and I felt informed during the process. So I think we need to keep moving and see where we can get.
So in regards to that, let me just, I mean, trying to get our arms around why we're doing this. And I think the biggest issue is control. 2033, there is no control. As Dan said, it just happens. And the employees don't want that, you don't want that, and nobody wants that. We need to control our destiny. So, I mean, that's the ultimate. I think Commissioner Wright asked me that question as to, well, why are we doing this? And when it gets right down to it, it's pretty simple. I mean, it's all about control as to where we're going to take this, how we're going to do it, and how it's going to be accomplished. So, I mean, that's kind of the simple thing. As far as, you know, some of the others silly things, I mean, one-stop shop, efficiency as a scale, not duplicating services. I mean, those are kind of all obvious type things, but when it gets right down to it, it's all about control. So I think if we would keep that in our forefront of why we're going through this exercise, I think it'd be helpful. And then one of the things that has been kind of brought up here is, you know, this was a great exercise you guys went through, because it really, I mean, it got my feeble brain thinking and so forth as to we had previously talked about maybe, we merge the HR, we bring the HR over, or the collection system stuff, and then it gets into that fear issue of maybe biting off too much. And so when you guys went through this exercise, I mean, I'm sitting there thinking, you got a laboratory analysis, and I've talked with you folks about this, that's retiring. And right now, we signed a contract with Snohomish County to do essentially laboratory analysis of water quality in the lake. $28,000, I think, was our $28,770. And you folks got a need for a laboratory analysis, and I think you pay them about $6,000 a month or something, somewhere in there. We obviously don't need them as much as you do, but in the summer we do need that. So kind of a 2/3 or maybe a quarter, 1/4 share or something, probably both short benefit. We could maximize what we're doing. And then as far as the safety officer, we just hired a safety officer. You folks don't have that. And his sole responsibility is to go around and identify issues that were in public works. And again, cost sharing. These are only 1 or 2 people at a time instead of trying to migrate a whole system over. And it would seem like, building that trust, which we've all talked about, that's a simple way of doing it. Getting the employees on the ground level kind of working together, and cost sharing for us, benefits, efficiencies, the duplication and so forth. So the other issue, your GIS person, information person, and the IT, we lost 2 IT people here in the last month. We've got 1. You don't have any. So we're out hiring right as of yesterday. I guess we advertised. Hopefully it's not too late, but I guess I would propose we have some input from you folks to see what your needs are, so that maybe we could do the opposite there, in a sense, maybe a quarter there and 3/4 on the city side. And we're looking at hiring a 3rd person, basically just for, as I understand it, computer applications and things of that sort. So I know you're backed up by the county, but you really don't have a hands-on person.
Yeah. And that was something that, because we met even after we had lunch the following day. We have a standing meeting every Thursday that we just like to meet and go over. Sometimes it develops into just talking about what's happening in the world. But it's one of those things, because we were talking about before, we do get services from the county, but we have nobody because the county's told us, your software is your software, you've got to back up your own software. And so that was kind of, because I remember when the IT first came to the city, when we hired, at the time, it was Troy and Rod were the 2 IT, well, it was mainly Troy. That was a joint venture between Lake Stevens Sewer and the city. We brought them together because we knew we each needed a need. And as a commissioner on the fire at that time, that's where we saw it, because I know that Chief Fawcett at the time had worked with Jan Berg, the city administrator, to bring that together. And the district just paid the city because it was a city employee, so we just paid a share to have it managed. But then eventually each site grew so big that obviously there was more work than what we had of that. And I think the district went a different route eventually. But those are some things that we're looking at, like why couldn't we start venturing and tiptoeing in to take a look at some of those cost shares, see if it is going to be something that work, because it could save, whether we decide they come in on as a district employee, we pay the benefits and that as part of it, we cost share that way. It's something to obviously take a look at for everybody, because eventually, and while we all think, well, it's years away, 2033 is really close, if not sooner, because we're already going into 2023, which all that's really making me think how much older I'm going to be by the time 2033 rolls around. But it's, sooner or later. And I think that's where one of the things we got from Chief O'Brien kind of taught us, you've got to get involved, because right now we all have the luxury of trying to put this plan together, because by 2033, if nothing happens and both sides stay at one way, it's going to be a light switch and nobody has an advantage, and it's just going to be chaos. And the only aspect of it is the commissioners that did represent can just roll away. And that's not, I don't think that's fair to the community, to each side, as far as what we're looking at is for trying to represent the organizations that haven't come together. There's gonna be a lot of changes. I mean, you guys gotta realize in the next, we know, the next 10 years, a lot of faces are going to change over that time. I mean, it's inevitable, because I know on our side, we've got people retiring. I guarantee the city side, people are going to retire. So it's trying to well, how can we make this roll into a seamless?
I mean, if you don't have a plan, then as you bring on incremental people with new ideas, you don't have a common vision in terms of where you're going either. So probably more emphasis around needing to have a plan that's mutually agreed upon and makes sense. That leads to our next topic.
Well, it's, identification of the bumps in the road. The simple one, we both got different accounting systems. I mean, that's like pretty basic stuff. We need to figure that out.
That is the primary one that I think was recognized years ago, when you really looked at cash versus accrual, because we all know the state auditor is not into having two sets of books. I mean, that might be problematic somewhere down the road. So, I mean, those are things we have to really look at and address.
You bring the auditors in as part of the conversation.
Exactly. Same thing with the bonding company.
Yeah.
What are the hurdles you see? And so that kind of leads me to retreat time, guys, in the sense that we need to roundtable it and get some of these experts in here and say, hey, what's the obstacles in front of us to really carry this through? Because we've all talked timeframes, generally speaking, but what is it really going to take? And that's going to rely on the bonding companies, the accountants, insurance companies, and the employees. I mean, if we can chart them or task them with some of these duties to get that buy-in, that's probably going to determine more than anything as to what the path is as far as the time frame. So I guess I would say if we could get together collectively as a group and start identifying some of these things, collective minds are better than Dan and I, and start working on this, that will dictate the time frame that will take care of item number 2 of our memorandum. And I think the other thing that Kevin kind of stressed in his meeting is you don't want to carry this on too long, because things get stale and it becomes rather mundane and you're not going to get there. So that was the item that he stressed. But anyway, I think if we proactively, again, chart our own destiny as to where we're going, let's identify the hurdles, identify the successes that we can work on, and start delegating and getting these things in order so that we can get our arms around the roadmap and see where it takes us.
What about, probably the findings from Ronald are going to be pretty important. Is that count?
Yeah, I think that's going to be an important aspect, because listening to the fire district merger was one thing, but we also want to get the experts that have had to go through the wastewater.
Do we have a date for that?
No, I've gotten, Mariah and I have been chatting. She gave me at one time a good contact, but I knew that we were running out of time with some of the planning stuff, and he was going to be gone. And then, because originally my idea was to, we both said, hey, how about O'Brien, because he lived through it. And then when I was chatting with the general manager, we said, well, let's find out about Ronald and Shoreline. So we did get a contact. We just haven't, when I say I just haven't really followed up and made that a point yet, because we did come into getting this one together.
So my suggestion, let's get that meeting, because we probably have some additional plans, and then decide. I don't know that a retreat, I don't know that we'd be able to line up all those people to have one big bang. Maybe we use the utility meeting, stretch it if we need to, and then pick one. We pick bonding, bring in the experts. Maybe that's 1 month. Bring in accounting, and those probably are going to repeat, but in the spirit of fact finding, start calendaring those things and having folks who do you even invite, what's their schedules, and start picking a couple of these things and then maybe we get to a point where, retreat or separate broader effort once we got all the stuff. Yeah.
But O'Brien also said it is important to get the electeds, all electeds, not just the utility at times. So people know, because what will drive something sometimes is if there's a lack of information, it is so easy to be fearful and say no. And we want to be able to, whether, I mean, it's easy for us because there's only 3 representatives from the sewer side, but we do have partners on the city side. There's 7 council members, and while you don't have to have all 7 on board, it's good, when people don't feel that they're given the information, there's fear. So at least if we can get people involved. Obviously, they're going to go at the rate that they're going to absorb that information, but we're just trying to lay out, because this isn't going to be just a light switch. Well, it can be a light switch, but when it's 2033, I don't want to be part of that one at that end, because it'll be a mess. I think that trying to do what we're doing and kind of figure it out and getting those who have lived it, meaning from an affected district, and kind of going there. I mean, like we've done that overarching goals that we put together. 1 and 3 were kind of easy if you kind of remember those. I mean, the 2 was going to be the work, as we all know, but it's still, I mean, 1 and 3 still have people within the organization, employees on both sides want to be involved. I think
and that fact finding piece in terms of the bonding and accounting, all that kind of feeds into what is possible the fastest from a time, motion, legal, what have you standpoint. And the employee piece of it is another, what's comfortable to have it be more comfortable or palatable to have it be a success. And probably the time frame is somewhere in between those. But we can get the information around what's possible. Because right now, we think 3 years is possible, but I don't know. I'm just saying from the hardcore number, and it's somewhere between that number and 10 years, the 33, it's somewhere in there. So listen, we can work on this, that's non-confrontational, and find out what that is. That needs to be done regardless of when it is. And then see where that leads us as we do the other pieces, and continue to find opportunities, whether it be capital in terms of facilities, or whether it be people that we're hiring. Any incremental need, we should ask the question: is this something we should do together in some way? Yeah, so that's great. I really appreciate the amount of time, energy, and expertise the 2 of you are putting into this. And I say it again, I think you're the right two folks.
So how do we, you guys, how do we address this joint cooperation of maybe, and I'll use the easy one as being the laboratory analysis. How do we address that? Do we have to put together an interlocal agreement, or do we just sit down and handshake it, or what? How does that work?
We have an agreement in place to talk to Greg about it. It's super simple. So
I'd say very similar to how we did the decant facility.
Okay.
Come up with an ILA and go forward. As far as the lab analyst part, I got a copy of the testing requirements that you need, and currently our lab isn't accredited for all of those. So we're going to have to make some steps forward before we can even take on that type of testing, but it's a great goal.
Yeah.
And opportunity for that. So we have some work to do.
We have had some, how shall I say, conflicts maybe with the counties, the water quality issue in the lake and so forth. And it'd be great to get control of that, I guess, and to get that conflict out of
keep it local.
Yeah.
And even like the IT, if it comes to manage, because I know we've worked in the last few years to get our software up that was compatible with what city was utilizing. And if there's that need, because the city is bringing on some IT professionals that can manage our software, which then can get some of the responsibilities of our,
Always better to have a first cousin doing the work than a third cousin.
Yeah.
So it's just, those are, I think, some of the, and like I said, it goes back for me when I remember the city and the district shared in the IT professionals that run the city. It worked for many years, but obviously IT has become such an integral part of any organization. Eventually, if you don't keep up on it, I mean, they said when we were just hiring, I think, Stevens way back in the day was big And there is, but look at, you guys, I mean, you do have a lot of stuff to manage like we do, you know, at times, and I know that it divides our attention sometimes when we have to stop to try to manage things because we don't have somebody who sole function is that, so.
So would you folks be comfortable with having Gene and Mariah talk about the safety officer, the laboratory analysis, and the information technology people?
Oh, I think so, yeah.
That makes sense.
Because, I mean, our safety guy just started, what, 30 days ago?
Yeah, a little over that, but yeah.
You guys, we used to use ACES was the name of the company. Way back in the day, they had somebody come in and just do the monthly safety. So obviously, you're big enough.
Well, we still use a training company.
Okay.
But Max is in charge of all the record keeping and making sure everybody's trained, and he's run the accreditation as well, so these guys know well.
So one question I have is, so the district did this exercise, and do the city have something similar that could be presented to us? Because, or maybe you all know all that, but I would imagine that you would see overlaps of how it would be beneficial for the district, right?
Yeah.
Since it's a merger, as Gary always corrects me, not a takeover, so let's see. But let's see, they probably have some ideas of how it would be beneficial for the district.
Yeah.
But wait, there's more. Isn't there a meeting tonight too? We can all go and stand outside.
Well, yeah, WashDOT's having a meeting in the Safeway parking lot of all places, but 5 o'clock to tell us our lives are going to be disrupted in the next 2 years, dramatically, but.
Are you guys picketing it?
No.
A bow tie round. Nothing sexier than a bow tie round. Newton doesn't have a bow tie roundabout.
Yeah, there you go. They have so it's not really a bow tie. It's kind of oblong.
I'm
a little
talking
bit, right?
bow tie.
I know it's not a traditional, but they do have almost an oblong version of it off of 204 on the east side of 9. Like, you remember the McChevron right there?
Yeah.
So now you can't turn, you have to go down, and it's not a rotary.
First one there.
Yeah. It's
How many jurisdictions have 4 rounds?
Well, yeah, that's, you know.
We're a destination for round.
Yeah, so if you want to get lost.
Largest lake in Snohomish County and the most roundabouts per capita.
And Starbucks, we're getting another one for the soon, so it's gonna be
So exciting.
All right, let's
New
wrap
names
this
for
thing
you
up.
to learn.
So anyway, we will continue our meetings with your blessings, and we will, thank you. We
Yeah,
will.
I'll get the information and just we'll follow up
Yeah.
and see what's gonna work with, you know, to meet with the gentleman from, that had to live through the Ronald Shoreline
Yeah,
District.
and we'll be prepared to report back to you in July.
I got a scamper because I'm part of the target support.
Okay.
Okay. Bye. I got the eggs in my car.
Good luck.
All right.
Well, one would think that, yeah, somebody that's got a reimbursement agreement with WashDOT, that they would have been at least invited us to the party.
You didn't get noticed?
Oh, no. It was like, the
only
SR9.
Red-headed
stuff
Boy Scouts, you know how it
I
is.
don't think the city got noticed either, because it was, I had my
Isn't
name
Harold,
on the
doesn't
list,
everybody
and I
get Harold?
announced it to everybody in their library.
Wow.
Yeah, because I only learned it when you and I were talking, you were saying they're having a meeting, I thought, well, okay.
My mom sent me the article.
Communication,
All comes down to
communication. All right, time. So anyway, we're busy, appreciate the time and such, and with that, anything else we got? I don't have my-
Development review,
Development review,
Yep.
it's attached,
that's pretty much it.
standing attachment there.
At the very end.
So just a quick question on the ERUs for the school calculation on this executive summary. Is this based on the school district building a new school, or?
I think it's based on how many people would be needing or be part of the school. So, yeah, I know the school district saying that they'll need more schools, so we're just anticipating that, yeah, a certain threshold of new residents will have so many kids and those kids will need preschool. But again, the school district was currently going through their population calculations while we were starting this analysis. So those numbers may change or may have changed from when we started the comp plan to now.
I mean, it seems since we're heading towards a downward production as far as available land, it would seem that we're not going to have as many kids here in the next 10 years.
That's not what the statistics are right now, though, with the district.
Yeah.
It's more kids. Like our elementary school just went up 20%. Highland, which is crazy, because it's a landlocked area.
Oh, Disney town. Oh,
Well, and I guess I would say
Okay.
probably in the next 5 to 10 years, that's probably accurate. But as the buildable lands become built out, which we don't really have much left, I mean, the majority of your development or growth is going to be coming from Marysville.
Seems like it, but that's not what's happening right now.
No, but that's what will happen because that's where all the plats are going, is the 83rd corridor,
Yeah.
north of Socorro Road.
that's still in the school district over there, so.
And that per household goes up somehow.
But
Yeah.
then again, the district, for sewer district boundaries aren't the same as school district boundaries. So they could be busing in more of those kids that sewer wise live Marysville side of the road, but then they're.
Well, that's true.
So,
Okay.
so they're still counting population that would be contributing to our flows.
Yeah, the daily population, not the nightly.
Yeah, the diurnal stays pretty consistent right now since we've got some commercial, but it's not a huge employer base, so our flows stay pretty stable day and night.
Interesting. Well, we got to maintain one high school, otherwise the football team's going to be depleted.
It really all revolves around that.
Football is what's important. Come on.
It's funny.
Yeah, exactly. Anything else? Community order,
Well, we have the action items for the approval of our,
minutes.
from April.
Anybody make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes. April 22nd.
Second.
All those in favor of approving the April 27, 2022 utility committee minutes? All those in favor? Any opposed?
Aye.
Next meeting?
Next meeting, when are we? Like 20 something?
Well, it was scheduled for the 27th. Yeah, that's the Wednesday. I keep thinking we're on,
27th.
yeah.
That work for everybody? 4 o'clock again?
Yeah.
Okay, it's scheduled. Much to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second. All those in favor, let's adjourn. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. We're back to the,
I make a motion to adjourn.
okay. And it has been said, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That thing, sir.
Yes, sir.
Nobody wants to meet that fun meeting yet.
$10.